actually going to my private YouTube channel for TIFA snow training, so that it can be looked upon and I can get critiqued. So that's why I'm doing it. Sorry that you guys are eating. It might be easier. You don't have to ask questions. No, I'm kidding. I know nothing. Angel music may be a good choice to put in the background, or classical music. Again, think about, you know, what makes them calm down. So, let's see. We already discussed medical barriers. So what are things that can cause problems medically? Medications, if their eyeglasses are not up to date, hearing aids not up to date, a lot of things we've already discussed. If they've got depression or other mental illnesses. Medications can lead to confusion. Make sure their hearing aids are turned on, the batteries are in them, and that it's current. And what about the person's in a wheelchair? That can also create a real barrier as well. This is something I know you guys, I believe, used to have them here. A lot of these software programs, if I'm correct. Didn't you have DACM?
We had DACM for a trial. It really was a challenge.
Okay.
Your friendship center has it.
They do, but they have people there all the time, and we didn't. And a lot of the people were not familiar with using the computer, so it took a lot of effort to get them engaged. Once we did that, it was fun.
Okay. And this is something that you can potentially recommend for them to use in their homes.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good way to get them engaged if it's possible. Again, it's all about appropriateness. I mean, everything that we look at, we always have to think, is this the right methodology for that person? And like I said before, with everything else, maybe today it's appropriate, tomorrow it might not be. As I've already said, once you meet one person with Alzheimer's, you have not met them all. Feelings. I think we're all familiar with this one, correct?
Nope.
People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they never forget how you made them feel. Especially people with dementia and Alzheimer's. They might not remember anything else, but like I was talking about before, the people that I set off, next time they meet me, that feeling comes up right off the bat. They might not remember what really happened, but they remembered the feelings that I listed with them when we met. So we always have to think, if we're bringing caregivers into their homes and they've had a bad experience, the likelihood is the next time that person comes back, they're going to have another bad experience with them. Live their truth. We've already discussed this as well. By giving answers that make sense to them, we acknowledge and validate their thoughts and feelings. So there's innate feelings, such as pleasure, love, joy, happiness, versus anger, anxiety, guilt, shame, fear, and grief. And then there's dominant feelings commonly expressed by people with dementia: sadness, anger, anxiety, guilt, shame, and grief. You don't tend to see pleasure, love, happiness, or joy. Or you see it in moments. That's interesting. Give me a second. Alright. Pitfalls of reality orientation. And I think we've already discussed this. Whose reality are we again trying to orient them to? Ours or theirs? And it's just going to become an argument. So, interventions, what can we do? Let's enter into their reality. Listen to them. Pay attention to their needs and wants. And with what you do, we need to make sure the family knows that they need to do the same. Show empathy, like we've already discussed. Biggest thing, offer reassurance and praise. They did something well. It's not a pat on the back. We should never pat people. It's kind of demeaning. But really be like, wow, that was amazing. Not over the top, because that's going to feel kind of fake, and they're going to buy into that right away. If people are talking, don't change the subject on them. Allow them to finish their communication. Allow for negative feelings to be expressed. This is one of my favorites. Caregivers never like to talk to people when they're upset. They always try to change the subject and make them feel better. If you don't allow them to be validated by this, you're shutting them down and you're preventing future communication. Ideally, after they've been able to express themselves, guide them to a positive topic, if it's possible. If not, and they need to go down that road, we gotta find something within that to bring them back so that they can feel good, or maybe we take a break and then we come back. Because if it's truly dementia or Alzheimer's, it's going to pass. And that's it. We are done chapter 2. Yay!
Bring on chapter 3.
All right, depression, repetitive behaviors.
Getting on to the fun stuff now.
When you were talking about barriers, you said environmental medication barriers. What was the first one?
Give me 1 second. Let me go back.
Just break this down.
It's fine.
My notes down.
All right. Barriers.
Which one?
Is that your salad? Pam, was that your salad? No. You make a good strawberry salad too.
Yeah.
Medical barriers, there's medications, vision disorders, blindness, acute illness.
There was environmental medication and something, the umbrella of them, not the subcategories.
So there was environmental,
The
medical.
one for environment.
Give me a second. Barriers to communication created by the caregiver.
Asset to our potlucks.
Wow.
She's a huge asset to our potlucks. With the bacon.
My mother's still excited.
We love it. She appreciates it.
Okay. Medical directors working with this population must believe in medications for depression. So you also have to think about the family members as well, especially with us, because how many times do we come into with family members that I don't believe in medication, mom doesn't need anything, dad doesn't need anything. That's what you're dealing with more than anything else, is how do we get the family to recognize what their needs actually are and how they can benefit from them even if they don't agree with them. Most depressions can be treated. Some of them can't because they're so severe. Should you in fact be dealing with someone that is in a facility, especially a dementia unit, it's important to find out if they have a policy for reversible dementia. What happens to that person if they've been in a facility and then they find out they're not actually demented, but it's actually been depression? What does the facility then do with that person? Do they allow them to come back out of that unit, and then do they transfer them home or to an assisted living facility or somewhere else in that facility?
That's a really interesting question, and my guess is
Well,
most people would not have policies for that.
they should.
Mm-hmm.
It's the question of looking into it and finding
Right.
out, you know, if that person goes in a facility and they haven't been diagnosed, and they haven't been able, because remember, depression and dementia tend to overlap one another.
Right.
They're very similar, and you know, sometimes once you treat the depression, they're not demented any longer.
Yeah.
So it's finding out, you know, what happens to them. Mom's been in a locked unit. Well, she's fine now. What do we do?
Right.
Give her more meds and make her crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
Also
Michael.
space too.
It's always the answer, actually.
Well, they always want to keep the heads in the bed, right?
Right.
So, health analysts estimate that up to 40% of people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias suffer from significant depression. That's a pretty scary statistic, but again, not surprising. So, screening for depression. Rule out pseudodementias, which we've already discussed. Rule out substance abuse or substance misuse. Are they taking their medications the way they're supposed to be taking them? Or are they self-medicating? Or is the family medicating them and deciding what they need and what they don't need? I'm sure you see that a lot. Evaluate for depression. So depression masked by dementia. How often do we see this? Because you make assumptions that it's one thing, and that's why it goes back to who is conducting the assessment and what assessment tools are being used. And are they using all the appropriate assessment tools to actually determine this? Because you're gonna have decreased function, you're gonna have behavioral problems, you're gonna have that caregiver that's overwhelmed, especially if it's the spouse, and premature nursing home placement. So, overlap with depression and dementia. Do you feel pretty confident about this information? Okay. Then. Benefits, treatment of depression. And you were supposed to, since we did it last time, you should have in your handouts benefits of treatment. Medications can benefit a person with depression and may be the only intervention that works. Unfortunately, that's not always true because sometimes people need ECT, and that's not always effective depending upon where they are with depression. Ideally, family members will agree with this intervention, and some wonder why treat when the person already has dementia. Well, there is a quality of life, and just because